My fiancé's work dinner kept getting more suspicious until only she and another young woman were invited. Jasmine's boss spent a month orchestrating the perfect trap, and I watched it happen piece by piece. It started innocently enough. Jasmine got hired at this ambulance chaser law firm and told me about their company celebration dinner. Partners were invited. Great. I'd finally meet her coworkers. A few days later, partners suddenly weren't invited anymore. Just employees, she said. Then it went from the whole office to 6 people who contributed to the best year ever. Then I found out all 6 were women under 30. By the week of the dinner, it was down to just Jasmine and one other female attorney, both 25. Weird how 2 junior attorneys are solely responsible for a 20-year firm's record profits, I said. Can't you just be proud of me? The morning of the dinner, her boss texted that he'd send a car so she could celebrate properly. When I offered to drive instead, he immediately changed the restaurant. Only the driver would have the address. This is literally trafficking behavior, I told her. It's a work dinner. Stop being controlling. Jasmine, he systematically isolated you, changed locations last minute, and arranged private transportation. She called me jealous and left anyway. She came home at 2 a.m., dumped me for being controlling, then went to bed. Classic Jasmine, threatens breakups to win arguments. 2 days later, she's getting ready for work, like nothing happened. You're going back? Why wouldn't I? Because your boss tried to orchestrate a threesome. She laughed. You're insane. We went to Le Bernardin. His wife was there. He talked about promoting me. I pulled up my phone. Le Bernardin was closed for renovations last week. Her face went white. We went somewhere else. 11 Madison Park. Also closed on Sundays. She couldn't remember where they'd actually gone. Then admitted the other girl never showed. Got sick last minute. The wife only appeared for 20 minutes before leaving for book club. She broke down crying. He'd spent dinner calling her special, mentioning his failing marriage, tried to kiss her when the car dropped her off. That's sexual harassment. I must have given mixed signals. She went back to work anyway. A week later, she got a promotion, requiring monthly travel with him. She moved to her sister's, posted about escaping her controlling relationship. Her boss liked every post. 3 weeks later, friends saw them at dinner. She wore a new diamond bracelet, a performance bonus. Her sister called me yesterday. Jasmine comes home crying from these work trips. His wife filed for divorce. He keeps promising to make her partner if she's patient. Jasmine texted last night. You were right about everything, but everyone would know how stupid I was if I came back. Being manipulated doesn't make you stupid. Staying does. She blocked me. This morning, everything changed. The other girl, Sophia, called me. The one who got sick that night. I need to warn you about Jasmine's boss. About what really happened. You didn't actually get sick, did you? No. I was in the car with Jasmine. We both went. My blood went cold. She said you never showed. That's what he told her to say. He had photos from the office Christmas party. Jasmine kissing a client while drunk. Threatened to report her to the bar unless she played along. Played along with what? He needed witnesses to think Jasmine and I were together all night. For his alibi. Alibi? His wife? She never went to book club. She's been missing since that night. I couldn't breathe. The police questioned him, but he had proof he was at dinner with 2 employees. The restaurant confirmed a reservation. The car service confirmed picking us up and dropping us off. Jasmine and I are his alibi. You need to go to the police. With what? We were at dinner. That's all they can prove. But there's more. This isn't his first time. She sent me a link. 3 years ago, another junior attorney at his firm disappeared. Her car was found in the river. Suicide, they said. She'd been traveling monthly with him too. Jasmine's promotion. The travel. She's next. The wife was getting divorced, taking half his money. Now she's gone. Jasmine's the reason for the divorce. How long before she becomes a liability too? My phone buzzed. Jasmine calling. I have to go, Sophia whispered. He monitors our phones. Don't trust anyone at that firm. Jasmine's calling again. And again. A text. Something's wrong. My boss just asked me to come to his house tonight to discuss my future at the firm. His wife supposedly wants to apologize for the divorce drama. Please come get me. I'm scared. Another text. He's here. In my sister's driveway. Says we need to talk about my loyalty to the company. The texts stopped. My hands shake so badly I drop my phone twice before I can unlock it and punch in 911. The dispatcher answers, and I'm already talking before she finishes her greeting, telling her my ex-girlfriend just sent me texts saying her boss was at her sister's house, and now the texts stopped, and I think he's going to hurt her. She asks me to slow down, and I can't, because I'm grabbing my keys off the counter and running for the door while trying to explain that this man killed his wife, and Jasmine was his alibi, and now she's in danger. The dispatcher asks for the address, and I give her the sister's street while I'm taking stairs 2 at a time down from my apartment. She tells me to stay on the line, and I say okay, but I'm not really listening anymore, because I'm in my car and starting the engine, and my brain is screaming that every second matters. I pull out of my parking spot too fast and nearly clip another car, and the dispatcher is asking me questions about what happened, but I'm doing 20 over the speed limit on residential streets, trying to get to the main road. She wants me to repeat everything, so I tell her in gasping bursts about the missing wife and the fake alibi and the attorney who died 3 years ago, and how the boss has been grooming Jasmine for months. The dispatcher's voice changes and gets more serious, and she says she's sending units to the address right now. She tells me they're 8 minutes out and asks where I am, and I tell her I'm maybe 10 minutes away depending on lights. She says when I arrive I should not approach the house and wait for officers, and I make some sound that might be agreement, but I already know I'm not waiting for anything. My phone buzzes against my ear, and I pull it away to see Sophia calling, and I tell the dispatcher to hold on. Sophia is crying when I answer, and she says she shouldn't have hung up before, and that she's been too scared to do anything for weeks, but she can't let another woman die. Her voice is shaking, and I can barely understand her, and I'm weaving through traffic trying to make lights. She tells me the boss keeps detailed records of everything he does to manipulate people, and they're in a safe at his house like some kind of sick trophy collection. I ask her why he would keep evidence like that, and she says because he thinks he's too smart to ever get caught, that he gets off on documenting how he controls people. I switch back to the dispatcher and tell her about the safe, and she says she's noting everything for the responding officers. Sophia is still on the other line, and I switch back and ask her the question that's been burning in my mind since she first called. I ask if she knows what he did with the wife's body, and there's this long, terrible silence, where all I can hear is her breathing and traffic noise from my end. Finally, she whispers that she overheard him on the phone with someone a few days after that dinner, and he was talking about disposal and arranging something at his family's property upstate. She says she didn't understand what it meant at the time, but now it makes horrible sense, and she's willing to testify to everything she knows. The sister's house is 15 minutes away, and every red light feels like torture, while I imagine what might be happening right now. I run one red light when there's no cross traffic, and my heart is hammering, so hard I can feel it in my throat. The dispatcher comes back on and tells me units are 8 minutes out, and I do the math and realize I'm going to get there first. I make a split-second decision and tell the dispatcher I need to call the sister to warn her, and she says to stay on the line, but I'm already switching over. The sister answers on the first ring, and her voice is high and panicked, asking where Jasmine is. I realize she has no idea what's happening in her own driveway right now, and I tell her to lock herself inside and not open the door for anyone. She asks what's going on, and I'm explaining as fast as I can that Jasmine's boss is dangerous, and he might be there right now, and police are coming. I can hear her moving through the house and the sound of locks clicking, and she's asking if Jasmine is okay, and I tell her I don't know, but I'm almost there. She says the boss's car is in the driveway, and she didn't think anything of it because Jasmine works for him, but now she's scared, and I tell her to stay inside no matter what, and keep the doors locked. I screech into the sister's neighborhood doing 50 in a 25 zone, and I can see the boss's expensive black sedan parked in the driveway, with the driver's door still hanging open like he left in a hurry. Jasmine's car is there too, parked on the street, and my stomach drops, because I don't see anyone outside, which means they're either inside the house, or he's already gotten her into his car. I slam my car into park at the curb and jump out, and the dispatcher is yelling at me not to approach, but I leave my phone on the seat and run toward the house. That's when I see them on the side of the house, partially hidden by the bushes near the garage. The boss has Jasmine by the arm, and she's pulling against him trying to get free, and he's dragging her toward his car. Her face is streaked with tears, and I can see terror in her eyes even from this distance, and she's saying something I can't hear. I don't think, just react, running at them as fast as I can and shouting Jasmine's name. The boss spins around and his expression shifts from smooth confidence to genuine surprise, like he can't believe someone actually showed up. For just a second, his grip on Jasmine's arm loosens, and she wrenches herself free and stumbles back against the side of the house. Jasmine stumbles toward me, and the boss reaches for her again, but I step between them and tell him police are 90 seconds away and he needs to leave right now. He actually laughs, and it's this smooth, confident sound that makes my skin crawl. He says I'm the controlling ex-boyfriend who's been harassing Jasmine for weeks, and that she called him because she was scared of me showing up. He's so smooth and confident standing there in his expensive suit, and his voice is so reasonable that for just a moment I doubt my own reality and wonder if I've gotten everything wrong. But then I hear sirens in the distance getting closer, and his eyes flick toward the sound, and I see something cold flash across his face before the mask comes back. Jasmine's voice cuts through the tension, and she says the words that change everything. He killed Rebecca. Her voice breaks on the wife's name, and I see the boss's entire face shift. The smooth lawyer mask cracks completely, and what's underneath is cold and sharp, like broken glass. He turns to Jasmine with this look that makes my stomach drop, and his voice goes flat and threatening. You gave me my alibi that night. You were there. You're complicit in this. He steps toward her, and I move to block him, but he's still talking, and his words are like weapons. If I go down, you go down with me. You understand that? The bar will revoke your license. You'll never practice law again. Everyone will know you helped cover up a murder. Jasmine makes this small, broken sound, and I can see her shaking, but the sirens are getting louder now, and the boss hears them too. His head snaps toward the sound, and for just a second, I see panic flash across his face before he lunges for Jasmine one more time. You don't understand what you're throwing away, he says, and his hand closes around her wrist and she cries out. I don't think I just react and shove him hard in the chest with both hands. He stumbles backward, and his expensive shoes slip on the grass, and that's when the first police car comes flying around the corner. The lights are flashing red and blue across the houses, and the siren is so loud it hurts my ears, and the car screeches to a stop at the curb. Two officers jump out fast with their hands already on their weapons, and they start shouting commands. Hands where we can see them! Nobody move! The boss's whole body language changes in an instant, and it's like watching someone flip a switch. His hands go up slowly, and his face goes calm and reasonable, and when he speaks, his voice is smooth and professional again. Officers, there's been a misunderstanding here. I'm an attorney, and I came to check on one of my employees who sent me some concerning messages. This man attacked me. He gestures at me with this perfect concerned expression, and I see one of the officers look confused, like maybe the boss is telling the truth. The officer's hand moves away from his weapon slightly, and the boss keeps talking in that calm, reasonable voice. I'm happy to show you my identification. I'm a partner at a law firm downtown, and this is my employee, Jasmine. Her ex-boyfriend has been harassing her, and I was worried for her safety. It's so smooth and believable that for a second, even I start to doubt what's real, and I can see the officers looking at each other trying to figure out what's happening. But then Jasmine speaks up, and her voice is shaking, but it's clear. He killed his wife, and he was going to kill me too. The boss starts to open his mouth, but I cut him off before he can spin more lies. Sophia called me. She told me everything about the alibi and the dinner that night. His wife has been missing for weeks. There was another attorney at his firm 3 years ago named Rhea Clemens who died, and it wasn't suicide. He's been manipulating Jasmine for months, and tonight, he tried to take her. The words pour out of me in this urgent rush, and I'm talking fast, trying to get everything out before the boss can twist it. Sophia has evidence. She overheard him talking about disposal. She knows where the body is. Call Detective Wiley, he's been working the missing wife case. More police cars are arriving now, and I count 3 more pulling up with lights flashing. A supervisor gets out of one car and takes control and starts giving orders to separate us. The boss is still trying to maintain his calm lawyer act, but I can see cracks forming. I want my attorney, he says loudly and clearly. I'm being falsely accused by a disturbed ex-employee and her controlling boyfriend. This is harassment. But the supervisor isn't buying it and orders 2 officers to put the boss in the back of a patrol car while they sort everything out. As they walk him toward the car, the boss keeps insisting on his rights and his attorney and how this is all a misunderstanding. I watch him through the car window, and even now he looks confident like this is just a temporary problem he'll lawyer his way out of. An officer approaches me and asks me to give my statement, and I start from the beginning while keeping my eyes on Jasmine 20 feet away. She's talking to another officer, and even from here I can see her whole body shaking. Her arms are wrapped around herself, and her voice is so quiet, the officer has to lean in to hear her. The sister's front door flies open, and she comes running out in her pajamas and slippers. She runs straight to Jasmine and wraps her arms around her, and that's when Jasmine finally breaks. She sobs into her sister's shoulder, and her whole body shakes with it, and the sister is crying too while holding her tight. I finish giving my statement to the officer, and he writes everything down about Sophia's call and the missing wife and Rhea Clemens and the pattern of manipulation. He asks if I can provide contact information for Sophia, and I pull out my phone with shaking hands. Within 30 minutes, a detective arrives, and he's this sharp-looking guy, maybe 40, with intense eyes that seem to take in everything at once. I'm Detective Archer Wiley, he says. I've been working the Rebecca missing person case. He listens to my statement again with this focused intensity, and when I mention Sophia and what she told me, his expression gets very serious. I need you to call her right now, he says. Put it on speaker so I can hear directly from her. I dial Sophia's number, and she answers on the first ring like she's been sitting there waiting for this call. It's me, I say. I'm here with Detective Wiley. He needs to hear what you told me. Sophia's voice comes through the speaker, clear and steady, despite the fear I can hear underneath. She tells Wiley everything about that dinner night and how the boss threatened her with the Christmas party photos. She describes being coerced into providing a false alibi and overhearing the boss on the phone talking about disposal and his family's upstate property. Wiley's expression gets darker with each detail, and he's taking notes fast. "Are you willing to come to the station tonight to give a formal statement?" he asks. "Yes," Sophia says immediately. "I should have come forward weeks ago. I can't let him hurt anyone else." Wiley ends the call and immediately makes another one. I hear him giving orders to send officers to an upstate property to search for remains. When he hangs up, he turns to me with a grim expression. If Sophia's information is accurate, we might have just broken open 2 murder cases. We've been reviewing Rhea Clemens' suicide and finding things that don't add up. He walks over to where the boss is sitting in the patrol car and has a brief conversation with the supervisor. The boss is formally placed under arrest for kidnapping and assault with murder charges pending evidence discovery. As they start to drive him away, the boss turns his head and stares at Jasmine through the window. His expression makes my blood freeze because it's not angry or scared. It's cold and calculating, like he's memorizing every detail of her face for later use. I step between them to block his view, and the car drives away. A paramedic walks over to Jasmine and asks if she's hurt anywhere. She's still shaking so hard that her whole body looks like it might fall apart. The paramedic guides her to sit on the curb and kneels down in front of her, checking her over with gentle hands. When he touches her left arm, she winces and pulls back. He asks if he can look at it, and she nods without speaking. He pushes up her sleeve carefully, and there are dark bruises forming where the boss grabbed her, clear finger marks pressed into her skin. The paramedic takes out his phone and photographs the bruises from multiple angles, while explaining that these will be evidence. He asks if she wants to go to the hospital to get checked out more carefully, but Jasmine shakes her head hard. She says she just wants to go inside her sister's house and feel safe. The paramedic nods and tells her to ice the bruises and take some pain medicine if they start hurting worse. Wiley walks over and crouches down next to Jasmine on the curb. He asks if she's up for giving a more detailed statement about everything that happened. Jasmine looks at him for a long moment, and then nods slowly. We all go inside the house together with Wiley, me, Jasmine, and her sister. The sister's hands shake as she fills the kettle and gets out mugs for tea. She drops a spoon twice before managing to scoop tea leaves into the pot. We move to the living room, and Jasmine sits on the couch with her sister on one side and me on the other. Wiley sits in the armchair across from us and pulls out a notebook. He tells Jasmine to take her time and start from the beginning, whenever she's ready. Jasmine wraps both hands around her mug of tea, even though it's too hot to drink yet. She starts talking in a quiet voice about her first week at the law firm. She describes how the boss complimented her work constantly, telling her she was the most talented junior attorney he'd seen in years. How he took personal interest in her life, asking about her family and hobbies and goals. How he gave her special assignments that kept her working late when other attorneys had gone home. She says he made her feel uniquely valued, like she was special in a way the other attorneys weren't. The manipulation was so slow and subtle that she didn't recognize what was happening until she was already trapped. The sister makes a small angry sound but doesn't interrupt. Jasmine describes how the boss gradually isolated her from the other attorneys by making her his personal assistant on important cases. How the other women in the office started treating her differently, like she was the boss's pet. How he positioned it as mentorship and career advancement, when really he was cutting her off from anyone who might warn her or help her. Wiley asks about the Christmas party photos that the boss used for blackmail. Jasmine's face goes red, and she looks down at her tea. She admits she got drunk at the party and kissed a client in a corner of the room. She thought no one saw, but apparently someone photographed it deliberately. The boss showed her the photos 2 days later in his office and explained very calmly that kissing clients violated professional ethics, that the bar association could suspend her license if they found out, that he would keep the photos private as long as she understood how serious the situation was. Jasmine says she realizes now that the whole party was set up to compromise her, that the boss probably told someone to keep her glass full all night and to photograph her if she did anything questionable. The leverage was created on purpose, so he could use it later. When Wiley asks about the dinner night, Jasmine's voice drops to almost a whisper. She describes getting in the car with Sophia and being excited about the celebration, then realizing during the drive that Sophia looked scared and kept glancing at the driver. Arriving at the restaurant and the boss explaining that Sophia got sick and went home, even though Jasmine had just been in the car with her 20 minutes before. The wife appearing for drinks and then leaving for book club. The boss ordering wine and telling Jasmine she was special, that his marriage was falling apart, that he'd never met anyone who understood him like she did. How he tried to kiss her when the car dropped her off and she pushed him away. How he acted hurt and said she'd been leading him on all night with her smiles and attention. How confused and guilty she felt, wondering if she'd somehow given him the wrong idea. The sister squeezes Jasmine's hand tight. Jasmine explains going back to work because she convinced herself she'd misread the situation, that maybe she had been too friendly or unprofessional somehow, that she owed him the benefit of the doubt, since he was her boss and mentor. The sister makes another angry sound at this, but Wiley speaks up gently. He tells Jasmine that self-blame is common in manipulation victims, and none of this was her fault, that the boss was a predator who knew exactly what he was doing. Jasmine nods, but doesn't look convinced. She describes the promotion that came a week later with mandatory monthly travel, how the boss framed it as a huge career opportunity while making clear her cooperation was expected. The first trip, where he tried to get her drunk at dinner. The second trip, where he showed up at her hotel room at midnight, saying he needed to discuss a case. The third trip, where he told her his wife was filing for divorce and blamed Jasmine for ruining his marriage. How he said she owed him after everything he'd done for her career. Wiley's phone buzzes in his pocket, and he excuses himself to take the call in the kitchen. We can hear his voice, but not the words. He comes back a minute later with a serious look on his face. He tells us that officers at the upstate property found disturbed earth in a wooded area, that forensic teams are being called in to excavate, that Sophia's information about the wife's body location appears to be accurate. Jasmine starts crying again when she hears this. She says she helped cover up a murder without knowing it, that her alibi let him get away with killing his wife, that she's responsible for a woman's death. Wiley leans forward and speaks firmly. He tells her that she was coerced and manipulated, that the boss is solely responsible for his crimes, that her testimony now will help ensure he faces justice, that she's a victim too and shouldn't blame herself for what a predator did to her. There's a knock on the front door, and the sister gets up to answer it. Sophia walks in, escorted by 2 officers. When she sees Jasmine, they both freeze and stare at each other for a long moment. Sophia whispers that she's so sorry she didn't speak up sooner. Jasmine just nods and says that Sophia is speaking up now, and that's what matters. I can see both of them crying with relief at not being alone in this anymore. They move toward each other and hug tight while both shaking. The officers stand by the door waiting patiently for Sophia to be ready to give her statement. Sophia takes a shaky breath and moves to the couch where the officers guided her, sitting down carefully like her legs might give out. Wiley pulls out a recording device and sets it on the coffee table between them, explaining that everything she says will be documented and used in the investigation. She nods and wipes her eyes, then starts talking in this quiet but steady voice about how the boss called her into his office 3 days before that dinner and showed her the photos from the Christmas party. The photos showed Jasmine kissing a client while drunk, and the boss told Sophia that he could report this to the bar association and destroy Jasmine's career before it even started, or Sophia could help him with something simple. All she had to do was go to dinner that night and confirm she was there with Jasmine the whole time if anyone ever asked. Sophia describes how scared she was, how the boss made it sound like protecting a friend, how he said Jasmine had gotten herself into trouble and Sophia could help fix it. She talks about sitting in the car with Jasmine that night, both of them confused about where they were actually going since the driver wouldn't tell them the address. The wife did show up for about 20 minutes like Jasmine said, but then she left, and the boss's whole manner changed. He started talking to Jasmine in this intense personal way, while Sophia sat there feeling like she shouldn't be present, and when the car dropped them off, he pulled Jasmine aside while Sophia waited. The next day at work, the boss called Sophia in again and told her the wife had gone missing, that police would probably ask questions, and Sophia needed to confirm she and Jasmine were with him at dinner the entire evening. He said if she didn't, those photos would go to the bar and both their careers would be over. Wiley asks specific questions about times and locations while writing notes, and Sophia answers everything she can remember. Then she describes something that makes my skin crawl, how 2 weeks ago she was working late and heard the boss on the phone in his office talking about disposal arrangements at the family property upstate. She didn't understand what it meant at the time, but the way he was talking, cold and businesslike about getting rid of something, it stuck with her as wrong. Wiley leans forward at this and asks her to repeat exactly what she heard, and Sophia closes her eyes, trying to remember the exact words. She says the boss was telling someone that the situation was handled, that the location was secure, that nobody went to that property anymore since his parents died. Wiley records all of this carefully, and then tells both Sophia and Jasmine that what they're doing right now takes incredible courage, that many victims of manipulation and coercion never find the strength to speak up against powerful predators, and that their testimony could save future victims. Jasmine starts crying again, and Sophia reaches over to squeeze her hand. Wiley's phone buzzes around midnight, and he steps into the kitchen to take the call, and we can all hear the change in his voice, even though we can't make out the words. He comes back looking grim but satisfied, and tells us that the forensic teams at the upstate property found human remains buried in a wooded area, exactly where Sophia described. The boss is being moved from county jail to a holding cell at police headquarters and will be formally charged with murder in the morning. Wiley says this case just became the district attorney's top priority and that everything is about to move very fast. Jasmine makes this small, wounded sound, and her sister wraps an arm around her shoulders. Wiley sits back down and explains what happens next, his voice gentle but honest. He tells Jasmine and Sophia that they'll both need to testify at trial, that the defense attorney will try to paint them as willing participants or even accomplices to discredit their testimony. But the coercion evidence is strong, the pattern of predation is clear, and the physical evidence backs up everything they're saying. He warns them that the trial will be difficult and very public, that the boss's legal team will be aggressive and try to attack their character and credibility, but he believes the case is solid. The sister stands up suddenly and says Jasmine is staying here for the foreseeable future, that she's not going back to her apartment alone, and she heads upstairs to make up the guest room. Jasmine sits on the couch, looking completely numb and exhausted, staring at nothing, and I sit down next to her, not sure if I should touch her or give her space. After a minute, she leans against my shoulder and whispers that she tried to warn her, and she called me controlling, that she pushed me away and believed everything the boss told her about me. I tell her quietly that the boss was a professional manipulator who spent years perfecting his technique, that she's not stupid or weak for falling for it, that these predators know exactly how to isolate their victims and make them doubt everyone who tries to help. I say I'm just grateful she's alive, that everything else can be dealt with, but I couldn't handle losing her. She cries quietly against my shoulder, while the sister comes back downstairs with blankets and pillows, and Sophia sits in the armchair looking completely exhausted and traumatized. Wiley starts gathering his things around 1 in the morning, getting contact information from everyone, and promising to update us as the investigation moves forward. He tells Jasmine and Sophia that victim advocates will be assigned to help them through the legal process, people who specialize in supporting manipulation and assault victims through trials. He says they should both seriously consider therapy to process the trauma, because what they've been through isn't something you just get over on your own. After Wiley leaves, I offer to stay on the couch, so Jasmine feels safer tonight, and the sister immediately agrees, saying she'd feel better having someone else in the house. Sophia speaks up quietly, asking if she can stay too because she's scared to go home alone, scared the boss somehow has people watching her or knows she talked. The sister tells her of course and goes upstairs to set up the second guest room. We all try to sleep, but none of us manage much, and around 3 in the morning, I get up to get water and find Jasmine sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, staring at nothing. I sit down across from her and ask if she's okay, which is a stupid question, but I don't know what else to say. She tells me she keeps thinking about Rhea Clemens, the attorney who died 3 years ago, wondering if Rhea suffered and if anyone tried to save her the way I saved Jasmine tonight. She says Rhea was alone and probably terrified, and nobody knew what was really happening to her. I reach across the table and take her hand, telling her that Rhea's case is being reopened now, and if the boss killed her, then that truth will finally come out. Jasmine nods slowly and says she wants to contact Rhea's family when this is all over, to tell them what really happened, to give them closure, even though it won't bring Rhea back. She says Rhea deserves for people to know she didn't kill herself, that she was murdered by someone who was supposed to mentor and protect her. We sit there in the dark kitchen for a while, not talking, just holding hands, until Jasmine says she should try to sleep. The next morning, my phone rings around 8, and it's Wiley calling to say the boss was formally charged with first-degree murder of his wife about an hour ago. Additional charges are being prepared related to Rhea Clemens' death because the medical examiner is re-examining Rhea's autopsy findings with new information about the boss's methods. Wiley says they're finding evidence that directly contradicts the original suicide ruling, things that were missed or ignored 3 years ago. He tells me to let Jasmine know that justice is finally coming for both victims and that her courage in speaking up is making all of this possible. I hang up with Wiley and sit there processing everything he just told me, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline of the last 12 hours. Jasmine comes downstairs looking exhausted and asks what Wiley said, and I tell her about the formal charges and Rhea's case being reopened. She sinks onto the couch next to me and starts crying again, but this time it feels different, like relief mixed with grief for someone she never met. Sophia emerges from the guest room a few minutes later and joins us, and I update her on Wiley's call too. The 3 of us sit there in the sisters' living room, not saying much, just existing in this weird space between trauma and hope. My phone rings again around 9, and it's Wiley calling back, saying he has more information about the search warrant they executed at the boss's house last night. He tells me they found the safe Sophia mentioned, hidden behind a bookshelf in the boss's home office, and when they cracked it open, They discovered notebooks filled with detailed entries about multiple women over the years. I put him on speaker so Jasmine and Sophia can hear, and Wiley describes how the notes are disturbing in their calculation, like the boss was documenting a hunting technique rather than relationships. He identified vulnerable targets, isolated them systematically, compromised them with photos or situations, then controlled them through fear and manipulation. Wiley says there are entries about at least 7 different women spanning back 12 years, and they're working to identify and contact all of them now. Jasmine makes a choking sound when she hears this, realizing she was just the most recent in a long pattern of victims. Sophia asks if the notes mention her, and Wiley confirms yes, describing how the boss planned to use her as a witness for his alibi months before that dinner even happened. The notes include entries about Rhea showing she threatened to report the boss to the bar for sexual harassment 3 years ago, which gave him clear motive to kill her and make it look like suicide. Wiley pauses before telling us the most chilling part, that there are recent entries about Jasmine from the past 2 weeks, describing the boss's frustration that she was becoming difficult to manage. The notes say Jasmine was asking too many questions about the wife's disappearance, and that he was considering permanent solutions to the problem, which makes my blood run cold, thinking how close we came to losing her. I reach over and take Jasmine's hand, and she squeezes back so hard it hurts, both of us understanding that if I hadn't shown up at the sister's house last night, Jasmine might have ended up like Rhea, or the wife. Wiley tells us the district attorney wants to meet with Jasmine and Sophia today to start preparing them for testimony, and the meeting is scheduled for 2 that afternoon at the DA's office downtown. Both women look terrified, but they agree to go, and Wiley says he'll pick them up at 1:30 to escort them personally. After we hang up, the sister insists everyone eat something even though none of us are hungry, and she makes eggs and toast that we mostly push around our plates. Jasmine keeps staring at nothing, and I know she's processing the fact that the boss documented his manipulation of her like she was a science experiment. Sophia finally breaks the silence by asking if we think the other women in those notebooks even know what happened to them, if they're still out there thinking their experiences were normal workplace relationships. The sister says that's what makes predators like the boss so dangerous. They're so good at making victims doubt their own reality that most never even recognize they were targeted. We spend the rest of the morning in a weird holding pattern, everyone too wired to rest, but too exhausted to do much of anything productive. Around noon, we all start getting ready for the DA meeting, and I can see Jasmine's hands shaking as she tries to put on makeup to cover how tired she looks. The sister offers to come along for support, and Jasmine accepts gratefully, so when Wiley arrives at 1:30, there are 4 of us piling into his unmarked car. The drive to the DA's office takes 20 minutes through downtown traffic, and Wiley uses the time to prepare them for what to expect from the district attorney. He explains that the DA is tough but fair, and she'll need them to be completely honest about everything, even the parts that are embarrassing or hard to talk about. The DA's office is in a gray government building that looks like every other government building, all concrete and fluorescent lights and worn linoleum floors. Wiley leads us through security and up to the 3rd floor where we're shown into a conference room with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. The district attorney arrives 5 minutes later, a serious-looking person named Rashid, who shakes everyone's hands with a firm grip and direct eye contact. Rashid sits down across from Jasmine and Sophia and gets right to business, explaining that the boss hired a high-powered defense attorney named Darkham, who's already making noise about wrongful arrest and police misconduct. Darkham's strategy will be attacking the victim's credibility and claiming all the relationships were consensual, which Rashid says is standard defense tactics in cases like this, but still brutal to endure. Jasmine asks how they prove it wasn't consensual, and Rashid explains they'll use the pattern evidence from the notebooks, the coercion tactics, the fact that multiple women were targeted the same way over many years. Rashid walks them through what testimony will involve, warning them that Darkham will ask invasive questions about their personal lives, their drinking habits, their relationship histories, anything to make them look unreliable or unstable. Jasmine looks sick hearing this, but she says she'll do whatever it takes to make sure the boss never hurts anyone else, and Sophia nods in agreement, even though she's clearly terrified. Rashid seems impressed by their determination and tells them that attitude will help them get through the trial, that juries respond well to victims who are brave enough to face their abusers in court. Sophia mentions the Christmas party photos the boss used to blackmail Jasmine, and Rashid's eyes light up with interest. She immediately asks for copies of any evidence the boss kept, explaining that if they can prove he deliberately created compromising situations to control his victims, it strengthens the premeditation and predatory pattern arguments significantly. Jasmine admits she doesn't know where the photos are, but Sophia says the boss kept everything in that safe, so they're probably already in police custody now. Rashid makes a note to check with the forensic team about recovering any photos or videos from the safe, and she tells Jasmine not to worry about the bar investigation into the Christmas party incident, because her cooperation here will weigh heavily in her favor. The meeting lasts 2 hours, and by the end, both Jasmine and Sophia look completely drained from reliving everything in such clinical detail. Rashid thanks them for their courage and promises to stay in close contact as the case develops, and Wiley drives us all back to the sisters' house in heavy silence. Over the next week, Wiley calls with regular updates as the forensic evidence comes together rapidly. The wife's cause of death is determined to be strangulation based on damage to her throat structures and fibers found on her body match carpet from the boss's car trunk exactly. Cell phone records place the boss at the upstate property the night after that dinner, when he claimed to be home alone grieving his missing wife, and security footage from a gas station near the property shows his car passing through around 2 in the morning. Ria's body is exhumed from the cemetery where she was buried 3 years ago, and the new autopsy finds evidence inconsistent with suicide that was missed or was ignored in the original examination. There are defensive wounds on her hands and arms, suggesting she fought her attacker, and bruising patterns on her neck indicate strangulation rather than drowning like the original report claimed. Witnesses start coming forward saying Ria told them she was afraid of the boss in the weeks before her death, and investigators find her journal entries describing escalating harassment and threats when she tried to end their inappropriate relationship. The Bar Association opens a formal investigation into the law firm and discovers the boss used firm resources to stalk and monitor his victims in ways that violate multiple ethical rules. He accessed their personal emails through the firm server, tracked their locations using firm-issued phones, and used firm money to pay for hotels and dinners that were part of his manipulation schemes. The firm's other partners claim they had no knowledge of his activities, but several employees admit they suspected something was wrong, but were too afraid to report it because the boss controlled everything at the firm. Then Jasmine receives a letter from the Bar Association saying she's under investigation for the Christmas party incident and for potentially providing false statements in the wife's missing person case. She calls me crying, and I immediately call Rashid, who tells me this is standard procedure and that Jasmine's cooperation in the murder case will weigh heavily in her favor. Rashid explains the bar has to investigate any ethical violations that come to light, but given the coercion and manipulation evidence, the worst outcome would likely be a private reprimand rather than suspension or disbarment. I relay this to Jasmine, but she's still devastated at the threat to her legal career, saying she worked so hard to become an attorney, and now the boss might take that away from her too, even from behind bars. I set up the meeting with a bar defense lawyer the next day, because Jasmine needs answers fast before panic completely takes over. The lawyer's office is in a downtown building with worn carpet and stacks of case files everywhere, the kind of place that handles real problems instead of corporate stuff. He's older, maybe 60, with reading glasses hanging on a chain and the tired look of someone who's seen every possible way attorneys can screw up their careers. He listens to Jasmine explain the whole situation while taking notes, nodding occasionally but not interrupting, and when she finishes, he leans back in his chair and tells her the bar has to investigate any ethical violations that surface, but given the coercion and manipulation evidence, the worst outcome would likely be a private reprimand rather than suspension. Jasmine's whole body relaxes at this news, and she asks what a private reprimand means for her career. He explains it goes in her bar file but isn't public, that future employers doing background checks won't see it, that her license stays active, and she can keep practicing law. The bigger challenge, he says, will be the psychological recovery and rebuilding her professional reputation after being publicly associated with this case, because even though she's a victim, people will remember her name connected to a murder trial. He recommends she document everything about the coercion for the bar investigation, cooperate fully with their questions, and consider whether she wants to continue at a law firm or maybe switch to a different practice area where this won't follow her as much. The meeting lasts an hour and costs $300 we can't really afford, but it's worth it to see Jasmine leave with some hope instead of pure fear about losing everything she worked for. Sophia faces the same bar scrutiny over the next 2 weeks, getting her own letter asking about the false alibi and her failure to report the coercion earlier. She calls Jasmine crying about it, and they meet for coffee, sitting in a corner booth at some chain place where they spend 3 hours talking through their shared nightmare. I don't go to that meeting because they need to process this together without me there, but Jasmine tells me afterward that having someone who truly understands what the boss did to them makes the shame feel less crushing. They both find a therapist who specializes in manipulation victims, a woman in her 50s who's worked with abuse survivors for 20 years and knows how to help people untangle genuine guilt from manufactured guilt. Jasmine starts going twice a week at first, coming home from sessions looking exhausted, but also lighter somehow, like she's setting down weight she didn't know she was carrying. Sophia goes just as often and texts Jasmine after each appointment, comparing notes about what they're learning, building this support system between them that helps both women feel less alone. The therapy is expensive, and insurance only covers part of it, but Jasmine says it's not optional, that she can't function without help processing everything that happened. She starts recognizing manipulation tactics the boss used that she didn't even notice at the time, how he isolated her from other attorneys by making her feel special, how he manufactured situations to compromise her judgment, how he used shame and guilt to keep her compliant. Understanding the mechanics doesn't erase what happened, but it helps her stop blaming herself for being weak or stupid, helps her see this was a calculated attack she couldn't have prevented. Rashid calls 3 weeks after the arrest to say the boss's trial is set for 6 months out, which sounds impossibly far away when we're all living with this anxiety every single day. He explains that murder trials take time to prepare, that the defense needs to review all the evidence and file their motions, that the court calendar is backed up with other cases. 6 months feels like an eternity of waiting and wondering, of Jasmine jumping every time her phone rings, thinking it might be bad news, of all of us stuck in this limbo where we can't move forward but can't go back. Rashid warns that Darkham will file multiple motions trying to get evidence thrown out or charges reduced, that this is standard defense strategy to test the prosecution's case and look for weaknesses. He says we need to be prepared for a long legal battle with lots of ups and downs, court dates that get postponed, motions that create temporary panic before getting denied. The waiting is almost worse than the immediate crisis was, because at least then we were acting and reacting. But now we're just sitting here trying to live normal lives while this huge thing hangs over everything. Jasmine throws herself into therapy and starts volunteering at a women's shelter on weekends, needing to do something productive instead of just waiting. I go back to work, but find myself distracted constantly, checking my phone for updates, playing out trial scenarios in my head. 2 months after the arrest, I'm at the sister's house helping fix a broken fence in the backyard when Jasmine comes outside and asks if we can talk privately. We sit on the back porch steps in the late afternoon sun, traffic noise drifting over from the main road a few blocks away, and she's quiet for a long time before speaking. She tells me she's sorry for not believing me when I warned her about the boss, for choosing his manipulation over my concerns, for letting her pride and shame nearly get her killed. Her voice shakes saying this, and I can see how much courage it takes for her to admit she was wrong, to acknowledge that I saw the danger clearly while she was blind to it. She says she understands now why I seemed controlling, that I was trying to protect her from a predator while he was actively working to make me look like the threat. She's sorry for moving out and posting those things online, for letting him use our relationship as another tool to isolate her. She's sorry for blocking me and refusing to listen even when I sent that last text about manipulation versus stupidity. I tell her I'm sorry too, that I should have found a better way to reach her through the isolation, that I let my frustration show in ways that made the controlling boyfriend label stick easier. I'm sorry for not understanding how deep the manipulation went, for thinking she was choosing him when really she was trapped by him. I'm sorry for not acting sooner, for not calling the police the night of that first dinner when I knew something was wrong. We both cry sitting there on the porch steps, her sister watching through the kitchen window, but giving us space, and we acknowledge that our relationship was damaged by what happened. The trust is broken in ways that won't heal quickly or easily, the foundation cracked by months of manipulation and isolation and fear. But we also acknowledge that we still care about each other deeply, that what we had was real before the boss targeted her, that maybe someday we can rebuild something from these broken pieces. Jasmine says she's not ready to jump back into our relationship right now, that she needs time to rebuild her sense of self and learn to trust her own judgment again. She says the therapist is helping her understand how the manipulation rewired her thinking, made her doubt her own perceptions, and defer to the boss's version of reality. She needs to find her own voice again before she can be in a healthy relationship with anyone, needs to prove to herself that she can make good decisions and protect herself. I tell her I understand completely, and that I'll be here as her friend, supporting her through the trial and recovery, whether we get back together eventually or not. I mean it too, even though part of me wants to push for us to try again right now. She needs space and time, and I need to respect that, need to let her heal at her own pace without pressure. We sit there for another hour talking about smaller things, easier things, finding our way back to the friendship that existed before we started dating. It's not the same as it was, and maybe it never will be, but it's something solid to build on. 3 months after the arrest, Darkham files a motion to dismiss the murder charges, claiming the evidence is weak, and that Rashid's team engaged in prosecutorial misconduct during the investigation. The motion is 50 pages of legal arguments about improper search warrants and coerced witness statements and violations of the boss's rights. Jasmine calls me panicking after Rashid tells her about it, convinced the boss is going to walk free on a technicality. I drive over to the sister's house, and we read through the motion together, my stomach dropping as I see how Darkham is twisting everything to make the boss look like a victim. But Rashid fights back hard with a detailed response, laying out the overwhelming evidence, the proper procedures followed, the voluntary cooperation from witnesses. The response is 70 pages demolishing every argument Darkham made, showing how the evidence against the boss is actually incredibly strong. 2 weeks later, the judge holds a hearing on the motion, and we all sit in the courtroom watching Darkham and Rashid argue their positions. The judge listens carefully, asks pointed questions, then denies the motion, completely saying the evidence is more than sufficient to proceed to trial. Walking out of that courthouse feels like a huge victory, the first time since the arrest that we've gotten good news, instead of just more waiting and anxiety. Sophia tells Jasmine a week after the motion hearing that she's decided to leave legal practice entirely, that she can't go back to being an attorney after what happened. She started training as a victim advocate instead, wanting to help other women recognize manipulation and escape dangerous situations before it's too late. Jasmine tells me about this conversation, and I can hear both sadness and understanding in her voice. Sophia says she needs to find meaning in the trauma by helping others, that she can't just go back to writing briefs and taking depositions like none of this happened. The legal world feels tainted now, connected to the boss and everything he did. Victim advocacy feels like a way to reclaim some purpose from the nightmare, to use her experience to protect other women from predators like him. Jasmine struggles with whether to continue practicing law herself, spending weeks weighing her love for legal work against the trauma of what the boss did to her in that environment. She talks it through in therapy session after session, examining her motivations and fears. Her therapist helps her understand that leaving would be letting him take something else from her, that reclaiming her career could be part of her healing instead of her destruction. The law itself didn't hurt her. One predatory attorney did, and she has the right to keep doing work she loves. But she also needs to find a safer environment, a firm where she won't constantly be triggered by memories of manipulation and fear. She starts looking at smaller practices, places with different cultures than the boss's firm, somewhere she can rebuild her professional identity on her own terms. 4 months after the arrest, Jasmine accepts a position at a small family law practice run by 2 women attorneys who know her story and are committed to providing a safe, supportive environment. The firm handles divorces and custody cases and adoptions, helping families through difficult transitions, and the work appeals to Jasmine's desire to protect vulnerable people. The 2 partners interview her 3 times, asking direct questions about her trauma and her therapy and what kind of support she'll need, making it clear they want her to succeed and heal while working there. They offer her a lower salary than she made at the boss's firm, but better hours, and a genuine commitment to work-life balance. Her first day back at work is scary, walking into a law office again after everything that happened, but she makes it through. She calls me that afternoon crying with relief and pride, saying she did it. She survived a full day of legal work without falling apart. I can hear the exhaustion in her voice, but also something else, something that sounds like hope. 2 months pass with more preparation meetings and evidence reviews. Then we're standing outside the courthouse on the first day of trial. The building steps are packed with news cameras and reporters shouting questions, and Jasmine grips my hand so tight it hurts as we push through to the entrance. Inside, the courtroom fills up fast with media people and curious spectators, every seat taken by the time the judge walks in. Darkham stands up for his opening statement wearing an expensive suit and a confident smile, telling the jury about a successful attorney whose marriage fell apart and whose bitter former employees decided to destroy him with false accusations. He paints the boss as a victim of workplace drama and vengeful women, his voice smooth and believable. Then Rashid stands up, and the whole mood shifts. She walks the jury through the systematic predation step by step, explaining how the boss identified vulnerable young attorneys, isolated them, manipulated them, and when his wife threatened his money and power, he killed her and used his victims as alibis. She describes finding the wife's body and the evidence connecting the boss to 2 murders, and several jurors lean forward in their seats, paying close attention. Jasmine takes the stand on day 2, and I sit in the gallery watching her raise her right hand and swear to tell the truth. Rashid asks her to describe how she got hired at the firm, and Jasmine's voice shakes at first, but gets stronger as she explains the gradual isolation, the dinner that kept shrinking to just her, the car service that controlled where she went. She testifies about the promotion and forced travel, the diamond bracelet that felt like a chain, the constant pressure to prove her loyalty to the firm. On day 3, Darkham starts his cross-examination, and he's brutal, asking about her drinking at the Christmas party, questioning why she kept going back to work if she felt so threatened, suggesting she enjoyed the attention and gifts. Jasmine stays calm and consistent, answering each nasty question without getting defensive, and I watch the jury's faces showing sympathy instead of doubt. One older woman on the jury actually glares at Darkham when he implies Jasmine led the boss on, and I feel a tiny bit of hope that they're seeing through his tactics. Sophia testifies next, and she's nervous but clear, describing the blackmail photos and the coerced alibi. When Rashid asks what she overheard the night of the murder, Sophia takes a deep breath and says she heard the boss on his phone discussing disposal of something at his upstate property, saying it needed to be deep enough that nothing would surface. 3 jurors look horrified, and one woman covers her mouth. Darkham tries to discredit Sophia by calling her a scorned employee seeking revenge for being passed over for promotion, but Sophia calmly explains details she couldn't possibly know without inside information, like the specific location of the disturbed earth before police even searched the property. Her testimony lands hard, and I can see the jury taking her seriously. The forensic evidence takes 3 full days to present, and it's overwhelming. Expert witnesses explain the carpet fibers found on the wife's body that match the boss's car trunk exactly. Cell phone records show the boss's phone pinging towers near the upstate property the night after the murder when he claimed to be home grieving. Photos of the disturbed earth and the excavation process get passed to the jury, and several people look away from the images. Then Rashid introduces the boss's notebook, the one found in his safe, and reads entries out loud, describing how he identified Jasmine as vulnerable due to her student loans and career ambition, how he systematically isolated her from other attorneys, how he created the Christmas party photo opportunity for future leverage. The entries about considering permanent solutions for Jasmine make my stomach turn, and I see jury members shaking their heads. A psychology expert testifies about predatory patterns and manipulation tactics, explaining how the boss's behavior fits classic profiles of serial predators who target vulnerable victims in professional settings. Darkham makes a risky decision and puts the boss on the stand, probably hoping his client's lawyer charm will work on the jury. The boss does give a smooth performance at first, sitting up straight and speaking confidently about how his wife left him voluntarily because their marriage had problems, how Jasmine and Sophia were valued employees who he tried to mentor and support. He denies everything with this calm, reasonable tone that almost sounds believable. But then Rashid stands up for cross-examination, and everything changes. She asks pointed questions about the notebook entries, and the boss gets defensive, claiming the notebook was taken out of context. She asks about the cell phone records, and he stumbles trying to explain why he lied about his location. She asks why his wife's body was found on his property if she left voluntarily, and his mask finally cracks. His voice gets sharp and arrogant. He starts talking down to Rashid like she's stupid for not understanding his explanations, and the jury can suddenly see the calculating predator underneath the smooth lawyer act. One juror actually leans back in his seat like he's physically recoiling from what he's seeing. The defense rests after only 2 days, because they don't have much to work with against all that evidence. Closing arguments happen the next morning, and Darkham tries his best to create reasonable doubt, suggesting the wife could have been killed by someone else, and the boss is just unlucky. But Rashid's closing statement destroys that theory piece by piece, walking through how every element of evidence points to the boss, and only the boss. She ends by talking about protecting future victims from this predator, about making sure young women starting their careers don't have to fear powerful men who see them as prey instead of colleagues. Her words hang in the courtroom air, and I can see several jurors nodding slightly. The jury deliberates for 8 hours, and we wait in a conference room down the hall, Jasmine pacing and Sophia sitting frozen in a chair. Finally, we get called back to the courtroom, and the jury files in looking serious and tired. The foreperson stands up when the judge asks if they've reached verdicts and says yes, they have. Guilty on first-degree murder of the wife. Guilty on second-degree murder of Rhea Clemens. Guilty on kidnapping. Guilty on assault. Guilty on multiple counts of coercion and fraud. The court clerk reads each verdict out loud, and the boss just sits there showing no emotion at all. But I'm watching his hands, and I see them clench into tight fists on the defense table. Jasmine starts crying quietly, and Sophia grabs her hand, and I feel this huge wave of relief that the jury saw the truth. Sentencing happens 2 weeks later in the same courtroom. The judge reviews all the evidence and victim impact statements before announcing 2 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole, plus 40 additional years for the other charges. The judge's statement is harsh, condemning the boss's abuse of power and trust, calling him a danger to society who showed absolutely no remorse for destroying multiple lives. The judge says the sentences ensure the boss will never hurt another woman again, and I watch him being led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, still showing that blank expression, like this is all beneath him. After sentencing, we stand on the courthouse steps, and reporters crowd around with microphones and cameras. Rashid and Wiley flank us while questions get shouted from every direction. Jasmine steps forward and speaks clearly into the microphones, her voice steady now. She says she hopes this case encourages other victims to come forward, that manipulation and coercion are real and serious, that justice is possible even against powerful predators who think they're untouchable. She thanks Rashid and Wiley and says she wants other young attorneys to know they don't have to accept harassment and abuse as the price of building their careers. The reporters keep shouting questions, but we head down the steps and into a waiting car. The Bar Association closes its investigations of both Jasmine and Sophia a month after sentencing. Both women receive private reprimands and mandatory ethics training, but the bar acknowledges in writing that they acted under coercion and duress. Their legal licenses remain active with no suspensions, and the bar issues new guidelines about recognizing and reporting workplace manipulation and harassment. The guidelines specifically mention power dynamics in law firms and the responsibility of senior attorneys to maintain professional boundaries. It's not everything we hoped for, but it's fair given the circumstances, and both women can continue practicing law without this hanging over them forever. 6 months after the trial ends, I pick Jasmine up for our 3rd official date since we started seeing each other again, and she's nervous about a speaking engagement at Columbia Law School the next day. We grab coffee and walk through Central Park while she practices her talk about recognizing workplace predation, and I listen to her describe the warning signs with this confidence she never had before. She stumbles over the part about her own experience, and I squeeze her hand and tell her the students need to hear the hard parts most of all. That night we sit on her couch watching terrible reality TV, and she falls asleep with her head on my shoulder, and I think about how different this feels from before, slower and more careful, but somehow more real. The next morning, I drive her to Columbia and sit in the back of the lecture hall, watching her tell 200 law students exactly how the boss manipulated her and what red flags they should never ignore. Several students come up afterward asking questions, and one young woman is crying while Jasmine hugs her and writes down the number for a therapist who specializes in workplace trauma. Sophia launches her nonprofit 3 weeks later in a small office downtown with funding from a victims' rights grant, and Jasmine joins the board while keeping her family law practice. I help them move furniture on opening day and watch Sophia interview their first client, a paralegal whose boss has been following the same playbook the boss used. The woman leaves 2 hours later with a safety plan and a lawyer referral, and hope on her face that wasn't there when she arrived. We all still have bad days when the trauma hits hard, and Jasmine sometimes wakes up from nightmares about that night in her sister's driveway. But we're moving forward together and building something good from something terrible, and that feels like enough.